Hi everyone, and welcome to Michael and Deborah Have a Chat. And this week we thought we'd just take a little bit of time to talk about select committees, which are kind of one of the engine rooms of Parliament. And in particular, Deborah, maybe this is a little bit in honour of the fact that you've just become the chairperson of the Finance and Expenditure Committee. Not that we have hierarchies, but the best and most important committee in Parliament, which has been very well chaired also in recent times.
By the previous chair,
I think it's fair
Mr.
to say.
Michael Wood.
Oh, I forgot about that. But it's great that you're the chair of the committee, and yeah, I really enjoyed my work on that select committee, both in opposition and then in Parliament. And actually, my work on select committees, I'm not permanently on one now, I actually found quite surprising the way that committees work. And I'm wondering if that was your experience as well.
Right, because of course I came in new in when was it, September 2017. And then when we ended up in government, I was immediately handed the responsibility of chairing the Environment Committee. So I think the first time I sat on a select committee meeting for the whole of a meeting, I'd put in submissions and things like that previously, but the whole of a meeting was the first Finance and Expenditure Committee meeting of the term, and that was you in the chair. So I carefully watched how you chaired the meeting, and then the next day I went along to the Environment Committee and copied exactly what Michael had done to chair it. And for a long time for me it was just getting my head around the procedure, understanding how to run things. But then after a while, I think like most of us newbies, I started to understand the nature of the work we were doing. It's important work, it really is.
Yeah.
You know, getting a bill, turning it upside down, inside out, working it, that's really actually something quite critical to the progress of our democracy.
Yeah. The thing that I think when I said surprised before, that I was most surprised by, because when I came in as an MP, I'd sort of been around the political scene for quite a long time and generally speaking had a good idea how this place worked and wasn't surprised by too much. But the thing about select committees that went over and above what I did expect was generally the collegial nature of them. Various exceptions we can talk about, and one that I can reflect on from today actually, but generally speaking, they're actually a place where members of Parliament do tend to work together and problem solve and negotiate and rub along pretty well. Would that be your general experience as well?
It is, in quite friendly fashion, and sometimes in quite pragmatic fashion. So on my previous committee, the Environment Committee, from time to time, the deputy chair of that committee, who was a National Party MP, would come in and say, look, we're going to oppose this, but it's just political. And he and I would say, right, well, let's get on with it, and we'll make sure that they could get their views in, that they could do the opposition thing. But it was never done maliciously. It was always in a spirit of, actually, this is our job, so let's get on with it and do it. So that was quite positive. But the other one is when, as a committee, all of the people around the table sort of hone in on a problem and set to solving it. We've done that a few times in bills in finance and expenditure when you were chairing it.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind most from F&E, we have acronyms in this place, was quite a bill that had quite a bit of profile, and that was the Overseas Investment Amendment Bill last year, which was a bill which banned foreign buyers in most circumstances for buying existing New Zealand houses.
Yeah, and the National Party opposed it, but nevertheless, they worked on it in committee. Yeah,
and so the bill we came with at the end of the select committee process was substantially different from the bill at the beginning, and I think much better. Yeah. And it actually was as a result of that work being done.
And in particular, one or two of the National Party MPs, as well as us on our side of the table, who said, well, we oppose this, but if you're going to do this, don't you need to do it this way? Don't you need to fix up this little wrinkle here? So it was, I guess some of them just got intrigued by the problem, even if they opposed it, but it was good fun.
Yeah. And I think your committee at the moment's working on this one here.
The Credit Contracts Legislation Amendment Bill, but actually Michael, this came into our committee when you were the chair, and so I've carried on the work that you've done there. So most recently, the bill comes into the committee, and the first thing we do is we send it out for submissions. So it gets opened up to the public, and people can write in and tell us what they think about the bill and what's good about it, what should be changed. And so that process of writing in finishes, and then our committee clerks will write to the submitters or contact them and see if they want to come and talk to us in person. So for the last few days, We've been hearing lots of submissions on this in person, so people coming in to talk to us about this bill, and they've been brilliant submissions from, this is to do with credit contracts, so things like hire purchases or short-term loans, payday loans. So we've had people coming in from the lending industry telling us how it actually works for them, but people coming in from, I guess, the budget advisory services telling us about the impact of those lending practices on their clients. So we've been hearing a real spectrum of advice on what to do on this bill, and it's been enormous fun talking to the people, but also quite sad at times because there's some really heart-rending stories come out around this. And hearing that from real life people who are working in this industry or who are using the products from short-term lending like that, that will help us to make better legislation.
One of the things I always find brilliant about those submissions processes is that you get the full warp and weft of New Zealand society. So we quite often on finance and expenditure we have the big four accounting firms and legal firms, people from the big end of town who've got significant financial interests who want to ensure that there's good quality legislation that kind of works for them and their clients. And then we will get some volunteers from the Waimate CAB who work with people on their loan applications and help them when they get into debt and talk about life in their community as well. So really, there's genuinely quite a sort of democratic forum in which people come forward, although it's quite formal. Something that reflected on a bit.
So people come into the select committee room and we're sitting in a U shape around the room, and as chair, first of all you and then I were up the front, and then the people who come in, they sit down the end, and they talk to us for a few minutes about their issue, and then we question them. So I guess a lot of people can be quite intimidated by that process, and I know a number of our submitters are often very nervous, so part of our job as chair is to help the nervous submitters through that process. The big four accounting firms, they can wear whatever they're experienced, but we had a woman in from a budget advice service just this week, and she was clearly very, very nervous. So part of what I was trying to do as chair was to help her to get through her excellent submission so that we could really understand what she wanted to say to us.
Yeah, and it's actually something I think we could do a bit of work on as a parliament. Like Parliament has been doing quite a bit recently to sort of open up its proceedings, make it a bit less mysterious, encourage people to participate, lots more use of social media for all of those forums and things. But I still think there must be some ways in which we can, without sort of losing the fact that it's important and does need to be structured in a way, ways in which we maybe could make it kind of a bit more friendly and welcoming. And I'm thinking actually of a session that you and I had earlier this year. We had a slightly infamous incident where the opposition members of the committee walked out, and we had a whole lot of submitters who therefore couldn't give their submissions to the Finance and Expenditure Committee, and it was on the budget policy statement, which is quite important. And so what we actually did is it literally wasn't time to rearrange formal hearings for them. So informally, we as Labour members of that committee met with them off to the side. So it didn't have the status of a formal hearing, but it ended up being kind of they did bring their submissions along, but we sort of more sat round table with the submitters as a group and
had a conversation.
And I actually think there was quite rich dialogue that came out of that, and I've wondered since then about are there ways in which we could kind of bring that into our formal system a bit.
That's something I'd love to see done. The other thing is that the way we do it is quite culturally specific. Right, it really fits with the white Western parliamentary culture.
You're in a Westminster Parliament.
Are we ever? So, and I often think for someone who comes in who speaks English as a second language, or comes from just a different tradition of the way that you communicate and discuss, so like many of our Māori submitters, the way we do a select committee is quite a long way removed from the way a formal hui is run. So,
that's right.
I sort of think, are we shutting people out just because our practice is so culturally specific? But how we'd reform it is tricky, because Parliament's time is limited. But maybe we do need to be doing something different in that space.
We do have every 3 years what's called a standing orders review, which is when Parliament effectively looks at the rules, how this place operates from the House to select committees and everything in between, and says, are there opportunities to change things? So that is potentially an opportunity, and that will happen before the next election, so it's in place for the following term.
Tell me your best select committee story. What's the thing you've actually enjoyed?
Oh, well, it's I think quite a heartwarming one actually, Deborah, and it's been in the news a bit recently. Last year we had a pretty dry tax bill came before us. We had lots of tax bills on. I'm sorry, Deborah.
It's a fascinating tax bill.
Yeah, it was a fascinating tax bill, and we had a guy come before us called Tim Fairhall, who's a man with Down syndrome. He came along with his mother, Joan, and there was some news about this at the time as well. And their submission was around the access to KiwiSaver for people with congenital conditions that might mean that their lifespan is shorter than other people's. And so as they explained it, a person with Down syndrome will, in many cases, have a shorter lifespan than someone who doesn't. But with KiwiSaver, you can only get access to it when you're 65. And their argument was that for Tim and other people with Down syndrome who are putting into KiwiSaver, they probably need to retire and enjoy that time before they get to 65, and they couldn't under the previous legislation. What happened in that process is we had a really good look at it as a select committee, and you sort of needed to do quite a bit of policy work to make sure that it worked properly and there weren't loopholes and mistakes.
So we couldn't do it in that bill.
Yeah.
But because it had all come through that process, the minister thought, actually, we need to do some work on this.
Yeah. And so we did, and we talked to him a little bit about that and said, he was aware of the issue, but we also were able to say, look, as a select committee, we've heard the submission, we think there's some real merit in it. This is Chris Farfoy, great minister. He set up a process, did some policy work, and now a new bill, which I think has gone to your committee.
It's in front of us at the moment,
it's in
out for submission.
How you'll fix it up.
Yeah. So that'll be fantastic, because by the time we get that bill through, over the course of 18 months, we'll have heard about a problem and fixed it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And so I know it's kind of the cheesy thing that politicians do say a bit, but actually participating in the democratic process and making submissions and things can at times be frustrating. You won't always get your way, but it can and does make a difference to the laws that we have, and therefore the lives that people can lead.
And also, when we finally got that solution in place and we heard that it was going to work, that's one of those days where you go, good days at work. It was a good day at work. Yeah. So
that's submitting is really good.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the other functions of select committees, and the one that I've got in mind is sort of that financial scrutiny function. And maybe you want to talk about that a bit. I'm actually going to go and grab a very handy little chart from my wall over here while you do that, which goes through that.
So obviously Parliament is about passing the laws or the legislation. That's a big part of our role. But another big part of our role is scrutinising what the ministers are doing and what their departments are doing, and keeping an eye on what money has been allocated to them and what projects has been allocated to them for. And then, so we examine all that, but then we also have to have a look at what they've actually done. So we look at their plans, and we look at whether or not they've actually achieved those plans. And that's an ongoing cycle of, in the first place, estimates hearings. So that's where they're setting out their plans and the money that's allocated to them. And then later on in the cycle, we're doing annual reviews. I think of them as annual accounts because I was an accountant, but we get their departmental reports and we sit down and scrutinise how they've actually spent their money.
Yeah. So it's all captured in this very nice sort of never-ending cycle of financial scrutiny that happens in Parliament. And you get these handy documents put on your bedroom wall from the New Zealand Parliament, and it does it pretty much. It ensures that there's effectively democratic oversight, and actually comes back to that really core constitutional thing that one of the main things that happens, that a government does, is to tax you and take money from you. Yeah. Ultimately forcibly. You don't really have much choice in that, and so kind of the quid pro quo, the deal, and this goes back to the early days of the Parliament.
I'm going to take you back to 1688.
That's right. Yeah, after the Glorious Revolution, was that Parliament then is able to scrutinise what the government does with that money when it appropriates it, and so that's what that cycle is. The government says we're going to spend our money on this stuff. Parliament, through its select committees, has those estimates hearings. Ministers have to turn up and justify it and face questions from the opposition and government members. And then it's the annual reviews as well. Did you do it?
And so that cycle of scrutiny just goes on and on and on and on and on all the time. So any select committee will have those reports in progress at various times of the year. And of course, on finance and expenditure, we do one more thing, which was every 3 months the Governor of the Reserve Bank issues a monetary policy statement, and we get him in the next day and have a scrutinise what he's been saying and what he thinks the economy is doing. So there's a whole lot of work that committees do that's critically important to our democracy. It's not legislation, but it is enormously important. And the results of all those hearings where we're talking to ministers or to the chief executives of government departments or to the Governor of the Reserve Bank, we write a report and it gets reported back to the House, and sometimes we debate those reports there as well.
Yeah, so all of those estimates and annual review reports, they go back and there is a debate in the House, and particularly for the opposition, it's their opportunity to dig into information, to make ministers answer questions, to hold the government to account. As government MPs, we can of course talk about all the wonderful and progressive things that we're doing for New Zealanders after 9 long years of neglect. So there's a bit of equal opportunities there as well.
But I mean, what it says in terms of the select committee roles is the select committees, are they the shop floor of Parliament, or are they the engine room of Parliament? They're a little bit hidden away. People don't often see them, but there's a lot of work goes on there, well away from the theatre of the debating chamber.
Yeah, that's right. I'm just sort of thinking of some of the other things that committees do. So petitions is the other one as well. So when people present their petitions to Parliament, an interesting fact, you only need one signature on a petition, but you're probably better off to get more. It looks a bit more impressive. Yeah. But when they get presented to Parliament, they get read out in the House by the Clerk of the House at the start of Parliament on each sitting day, and the Clerk then sends them off to the relevant subject select committee, and then it's select committees who consider them. And depending on the weight of the issue, depending on factors like the number of people and how members feel, that select committee might then call the submitter to come and actually talk to the committee, might ask government officials or other people to come and talk on that issue, and then again in the standard way issues a report which can make recommendations and say to the government, we think you should look at this. So I'm thinking of one we had last year, which was a group of people from the Government Superannuitance Fund. These are former public servants who are paid into a government superannuation fund, and effectively they've been a bit of a dispute or a disagreement about the way that the government had calculated their entitlements. It was quite complicated, but broadly it was that. And they've been going on about this for literally decades in different ways.
And they developed a whole set of grim humour around it, because they said, well, there are fewer and fewer of us because they keep on dying. And that's their own joke. Good on them for approaching with that kind of good humour. But eventually we got through that and through the report. Yeah,
and as a select committee, we were able to say, look, we've looked into this, and we do think that there is an issue with the way that this calculation has happened, and we've recommended the government looks really closely at that. The government will have to work out how it deals with that, but we've been able to put something on the record that wasn't there before, which, let's see, but may well advance that issue.
Yeah. So lots of things that select committees do. Yeah. You know what? The bells are about to go for the end of the parliamentary day.
They are. So we've had a long week here. We had end of life choice debate here until about midnight last night. Put a treaty bill today as well. The referendum bill, which will set up the provisions of the referendum on legalising personal use of cannabis at the next election. That's going through the House at the moment.
Haven't we had the derivatives bill as well, or was that last week? I can't remember.
It all sort of flows into one sometimes. So thanks very much for tuning in again. Don't forget, we do these podcasts around about once a month. So feel free to subscribe if you want updates to hear what Michael and Deborah are talking about. Thanks very much.
Ka kite anō.